All right, so today, the quiz number 8 review, we are basically just going to go over, I think it's 7 examples, but some of these are really quick. On the right side, you can see properties that we're supposed to know, and it's going to happen again, I think, like in number 4. I'm going to write some more properties for you guys, but like at the very top, I was talking before I started recording about the negative powers, right? Negative powers lead to fractions, so that's how it works. Also, how to rewrite an exponential. So the second thing that I listed here, an exponential into a radical, right? So x to the p over I is equal to the ith root of x all to the power of p. Make sure you guys remember that. There was a couple of you guys that mixed it up on the quiz, and unfortunately you wrote the fractions out, but they were like upside down. So make sure you guys remember the top number is your power, the bottom number is your index. And then the last thing right here is what happens when you have a fraction inside of a square root. You can split it into 2 square roots, or you can get the 2 radicals and put them together into 1 fraction. Like either way works. Okay. Now for number 1, I know you guys don't have the calculators right now, but I'm just going to do this by hand. But just know you can use a calculator for this. So I'll kind of put a little note here. Use calculator. You don't have to do this by hand. Okay. But if you do try to do this by hand, this is what happens. You see the negative half, how it's a negative power? What it does is it flips the number around. Okay. And then you apply the power to every one of those numbers. So it's like 1 to the half over 16 to the half. Now, just like I said, you guys don't have to worry about doing this because this is calculator based. Okay. Right now, you could just write the answer if you want. And then the half power, that basically means square root. So this is the square root of 1, and the square root of 16, which is 1/4. So instead of doing all that work, I told you guys, hey, just get your calculator, right? Get your calculator, type in 16 to the power of negative half. It should give you a 1/4. Okay. But I just kind of applied the properties that are there. Okay. So I wouldn't, if I was you, I wouldn't have done all that work. I would have typed it in. Okay. So there will be questions like that on the test where all you're going to have to do is type it in, write down the answer, and you're good. Okay. So don't feel like, oh man, I got to learn a whole new thing. No, you don't. Just put it into your calculator. All right. So 8 to the 2/3, it's the same thing. You can just use a calculator. So I'll put that as well right here. Just use calculator. And you're just going to type it in. Okay, 8 to the 2/3, that comes out to 4. Okay, how does it come out to 4? Well, we can rewrite this if you want. 8 to the 2/3 is the cubed root of 8 squared. Like you guys should know how to do that, right? How to rewrite an exponential as a radical again. And what's the cubed root of 8? Anybody remember? The cubed root of 8. Not 4. That's a 2, yeah. Yeah, it's a 2 because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, right? So it's 2 squared, and 2 squared is 4. So the answer does come out to 4, but there you go. But instead of doing all that, you can just type it into your calculator. Remember, these are just numbers with powers, so your calculator can do them. The things that your calculator can't do are things like number 3. Actually, I don't need to put this right there. So the things like number 3 is what your calculator can't do completely. It can do some of it, but it can't do all of it. But before we go into the actual problem, I just want to remind you of a couple more properties. So the top property right there, xy to the nth power, that's the power of products, meaning if you have two things multiplying each other with the power on the outside, you can distribute that power in. Okay, so that's this one up here, the top one. And then the second one here is the power of powers of powers, I guess you could say, right? Um, so when you have a power raised to a power, it becomes a product. You multiply. Okay. So the x to the power of n to the power of m becomes x to the n times m power. So whenever you have a power to a power, you multiply. Okay. So let's go ahead and apply that to example number 3. So since there's a product inside of that parenthesis, right, 25 times y squared, I'm going to split it up. by distributing that power. Okay, so that's 25 to the 3 halves and y squared to the 3 halves. Now 25 to the 3 halves you can do on your calculator. Okay, you can use your calculator to figure out 25 to the 3 halves. I think it comes out to 125. Let me think about it. So that's going to be a square root 25 to the third power. So that's 5 to the third. Yeah, that's 125. Okay, so on your calculator, you just type that in, 25 to the 3 over 2 power. You get 125. Now, y squared to the 3 halves is y, well, 2 times 3 halves. Now, 2 times 3 halves is just 3. So it's 125 y to the third. And that's it. There's your answer. So you will use your calculator to do the 25 to the 3 halves. You can also use your calculator to multiply 2 times 3 halves. Okay? So just make sure you punch it in properly. It should give you an answer of 3 for that, and you're good. If you want to do it by hand, just so you know, 2 times 3 halves, basically this cancels right here. So that's why the answer is 3. Okay? But like I said, just punch it into your calculator. You should be fine. All right. So a lot of the test, surprisingly, is based on those first 3 problems. I think the whole front side is. Okay? And maybe even a little bit of the back side. And then there's a couple problems that are like this. Okay? And they're going to go from easy to more difficult. Okay? So this one's considered an easier problem. And the reason why it's easier is because notice it's equal to a number, not a letter, right? When they're equal to a letter, that becomes a little bit more of a problem because we start having to square letters and then that results in multiple answers and it just makes it a little bit tougher to do. So for us right here, this says the radical x minus 3 equals to a 1. That's good, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square both sides, okay? So I'll square this side here and this side here. So I get x minus 3 is equal to 1. And then just add the 3 over to this side. So I get x is equal to 4. Okay? So I'm done. Now it says check for extraneous solutions, which means I do have to kind of check it. Okay? So I'm going to put a 4 into my original equation. So this is the square root of 4 minus 3 is equal to 1. So that means the square root of 1 is 1, which is true. 1 is equal to 1. So we're good. This answer works out. Okay? So there are going to be questions like this, easier types. Okay? But then there, as usual, they like to throw in things that are a little bit more challenging, right? So this one's going to be a little bit more challenging. And then the next one's going to be a little easier. And then the next one's going to be more challenging. So, but this one will be a little more challenging because notice it's equal to a variable. V is equal to something, right? Not like a 3 is equal to something. If it was like a 5, then that'd be easy. Like a 5 equals to something, that'd be easier. This is a letter. So I'm going to do the same thing I just did, just that my way of solving is going to change. I'm still going to square both sides. So this gives me v squared is equal to 20 minus v. But now I see a v squared, which means a power of 2 has 2 solutions. That means I'm probably going to have to factor this stuff out. So I'm going to start moving things over. This 20 is going to go over. This negative v is going to go over. So this becomes v squared plus v minus 20 is equal to 0. And like we did yesterday, once I have a trinomial equal to 0, I'm supposed to do the x method. So I'm going to put my a here, which is 1, my b, which is 1, my c, which is negative 20. Okay? So x method says that on top, I'm going to write negative 20, on the bottom a 1. I'll use a 4 and a 5 as my multiples with a negative 4 and a positive 5. I don't have to divide those numbers because a is 1. So my factors are v minus 4, v plus 5. Okay? So let me go ahead and put that back over here where my work is. So that's a v minus 4, v plus 5 equal to 0. And yesterday I asked you what I do next, and you guys said solve each one or split it in half, right? So basically we're going to get each piece and set it equal to 0. So v minus 4 equals 0. V plus 5 equals 0. So I get that either v is 4 or that v is negative 5. So I have to test both answers, right? Like I said, that's kind of like the annoying part of these. It's not so much that the work is terrible, but the answers can kind of get a little bit annoying to check, right? So we got to check them though. We have no choice. So let's see. Right here, if v is 4, I get 4 equal to the square root of 20 minus 4. I know 20 minus 4 is 16, and I know that the square root of 16 is 4, so that checks out. Now, if v is negative 5, then I'm going to put negative 5 is equal to the square root of 20 minus a negative 5. So that's negative 5 is equal to the square root of 20 plus 5. Well, 20 plus 5 is 25, and the square root of 25 is 5. That doesn't work. So negative 5 is an extraneous solution. My only answer is 4. So remember, once you start finding multiple answers, you really got to check them. If you're only finding one, like the one we just did, you probably don't have to check it, okay? Like we did example 4, you probably don't have to check that one. But example 5, you do want to check them because we have multiple solutions. So sometimes one of them doesn't work. So example number 6, we're almost done here. We got up to 7. It looks like it's going to be a hard problem, but if you remember, I taught you this type of problem when we were discussing the basic equations, right? This was on Friday, right? The basic equations. So that means this one can't be that difficult, okay? And like I said, there'll be stuff like this on your quiz. When you see a square root equal to a square root, or just say a radical equal to a radical, we're going to square it, okay? Oops, let me get rid of the blue here. We're going to square both sides. So square root equal to a square root, we're going to square them. That's going to leave me with negative 1 minus b equal to 2b plus 11. So all I have to do now is just move stuff around. I'm going to move the negative b over to the right side, and I'm going to move the 11 over to the left side. I'm going to do them both at the same time, okay? So if I move the 11 to the left, this becomes a negative 12, okay? And then if I move the negative b to the right, that becomes a 3b, because it's 2b plus b. So I'll divide both sides by 3, and I get negative 4 is equal to b. Okay? Now, like I said, you probably don't have to check this. I'm just going to do it. You don't have to write it down if you don't want to, but I'm just going to check it. So we're going to let b equal negative 4. So just so you can see, it's going to work out negative 1 minus a negative 4 equals to 2 times negative 4 plus 11. That's the square root of negative 1 plus 4 equal to negative 8 plus 11. So radical 3 is radical 3. Well, that makes sense. Same number, right? Like I said, if it's just one answer, you probably don't have to check it because that's the only answer that we were able to solve. When you get multiple answers, then you do have to check them, okay? Even if you remember the homework we did on Friday, right? That one, I asked you to check all the answers, but they all should have worked because those were all just one solutions, right? And the stuff I gave you on Monday, yesterday, you got multiple solutions, and all of a sudden, not everything worked. So you had to check them, okay? So here, we checked it, it works. So we got one more of these, and then we're done. Obviously, since we got one more and we haven't done anything like really that difficult or super difficult, I'm going to obviously give you one that's on the harder side because they're going to give you something like this for sure, at least one on the quiz, right? They're checking to see if you can do the really tough ones. So last example, number 7, negative x plus radical 2x minus 4 equals to negative 6. Now remember, the point of doing these problems, the place where you have to get these problems to is where the radical is by itself. Right now there's a negative x next to it. So let's move that negative x over to the other side. So I'm going to get radical 2x minus 4 is equal to x minus 6. Now that the radical is by itself, I'm going to square both sides. So I'm going to square both sides of this equation. So this squared x minus 6 squared. Now remember what I told you guys, do not write on the right side x squared minus 36, okay? I know a lot of us might want to do that really quick. We just think distributing it, but don't do that. Yeah, that's what we're going to want to do. We're going to want to expand it because it's a binomial squared. That means you got to write it twice, okay? So the left side is just 2x minus 4. On the right side is x minus 6 times x minus 6, okay? And we're going to have to distribute it. You could do it in your head. You can do it by drawing lines. I'm just going to do the lines here, but you don't have to draw this out. So x times x, that's x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. Negative 6 times x is negative 6x. And negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. Okay? So combine your two middle terms, the negative 6x minus 6x. So let's see, we get 2x minus 4. That's x squared minus 12x plus 36. And now, since we have our x squared on the right side, I'm going to move the 2x and the minus 4 over to the right. Okay? So I'm going to move the 2x over to this side. I'm going to move the minus 4 over to that side. Okay? So I get 0 equal to x squared. Now, negative 12x minus 2x is negative 14x. And then negative 4 added to 36. So we're going to add 4. So that's going to give me a 40. So now I have to do the x method. So remember, guys, this is one of those tougher problems because you're going to have to expand it and then combine it and then factor it and then solve, right? So this is a busy problem. So here we go. My ABCs look like this. My A is 1. My B is negative 14. My C is 40. Okay, so on the top, I put a 40. On the bottom, I put a negative 14. The two numbers that will multiply to positive 40 and add up to negative 14, that's a negative 4 and a negative 10. I don't have to divide them because A is 1. So my factor is x minus 4, x minus 10. So I'm going to put that back into my problem. Remember, my green ink is always for scratch work, right? Unless I have to assign it for something else. But usually for me, it's scratch work. So that's stuff that doesn't have to be done. Some people can easily factor this in their head, okay? Like at this point, I can just do it in my head. I don't have to worry about it. I've been doing this for so long, right? So I don't have to do the X method. But for some people, they still have to, and that's fine. That's the scratch work in green. So let's go ahead and solve them. I got x minus 4 equals 0. X minus 10 equals 0. That means that x is 4 or x is 10. Now, I'm going to have to check these things. Okay, so x is either 4 or x is 10. Give me a second. I'm going to copy this thing. Let me put it down here so that I have the equation to look at. So let's check it. Now, I know some people yesterday, I think in third period, and I'm not sure if some people in here asked me this, but they said, is it okay if I move the negative x over to the right side when I plug it in so I can check like that? Does it matter? It doesn't matter. You can leave the negative x on the left side or you can move it to the right side. It's up to you. The answer should still either be true or false. Okay, so it doesn't matter. I'm just going to leave it alone. So here's my check step. Let x equal to 4. I'm going to start with 4, okay? So negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 2 times 4 minus 4 equal to negative 6. So negative 4 plus the square root of 8 minus 4 equals to negative 6. Well, negative 4 plus the square root of 4 is negative 6. I know the square root of 4 is 2, so that's negative 4 plus 2 is negative 6. So negative 2 equals negative 6. That's not good. So 4 doesn't work. Okay, this is not true. 4 is extraneous. Now we're going to check 10. So negative 10 plus the square root of 2 times 10 minus 4 is equal to negative 6. Okay, so negative 10 plus the square root of 20 minus 4 is negative 6. Well, 20 minus 4 is 16, so that's the square root of 16 inside the radical. So negative 10 plus square root of 16 equals negative 6. The square root of 16 is 4, so that's negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6. And negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6. That checks out. That means my only answer is x equals to 10. Okay, like I said, unfortunately, you do have to check these. You have no choice. Okay, whenever you have multiple answers, you got to check them. Okay, because one of them is bound not to work. Now, sometimes they both work. Sometimes none of them work and you write no solution. But usually one does, one doesn't. So the thing is, you got to figure out which one doesn't. Okay, so that's basically it. This is what's going to be on your quiz. You can see there's going to be some easy stuff, like the stuff in the very beginning, right? This stuff right here is all calculator based. Now, I did the work, but I wouldn't actually, if I had a calculator in front of me, I wouldn't do it. I'd just type it in, okay? And I'd get an answer of 1/4. Same with number 2. I'd just type it in, get an answer of 4, okay? Number 3, that's a little different, right? Number 3, I have to know some properties. So I would just type in 25 to the 3/2 on my calculator, but the y squared to the 3/2, I have to know how that works, okay? So I have to understand like a power to a power is a product. So I got to multiply the power times the power, right? So I got to do that. And after that, it's just stuff we did Friday and Monday, okay? Easier problems like 4 and 6, right? These were easier, okay? And then we got the harder problems, the ones that ended up with v squareds, x squareds, right? Square powers. That means there's 2 answers. You're going to have to check 2 different solutions. And there will be, like I said, something like number 7 that's going to be on the harder part where you're going to have to square a binomial, expand it, combine it, factor it, solve it. Like there's a lot of steps in that. There will be at least one. I'm pretty sure only one because these take too long. So I'm pretty sure we're not going to make you do 2 of them. But maybe they will. I don't know. I can't remember. I'm not to look right now. But I think there's only one of these that's really on the tougher side. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. Let me go ahead and stop the recording then in case you have any questions.